I've been a glassblower for more than 50 years now, and when I started in 1971, you could probably say that I was pretty low tech. I was living in a teepee in northern Vermont, and I was trading my glass for food. And that's how I survived for the first few years. But by the mid-70s, I had moved down here to Western Massachusetts to a beat-up old farm. And things really started to take off for me, and I started to sell my glass as far west as Worcester and Boston, or east as to Worcester and Boston, and far west as New York. And but in the next few years, things really did start to take off for me. Rosalind and Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, used my wine goblets for a state dinner in the White House, and then Life magazine did a whole photo spread about my glass. And the Corning Museum of Glass included my work in a major show. And by the end of all that, I was selling glass as far south as New Jersey and as far west as Ohio. And one thing about moving from a teepee to an old house, I moved from low-tech to amazing high-tech, because suddenly I had hot and cold running water, I had electricity, and I had a telephone. And that telephone started ringing pretty much all the time, day and night. Later on, they came out with answering machines. And I just couldn't abide getting one. They were just so impersonal, but I didn't want to have anything to do with them. So even though toward the middle and the late 80s, I started selling my glass literally around the world, so that I'd get calls sometimes super early in the morning or super late at night. And instead of getting an answering machine, I decided to answer the phone with strange voices and take messages. So one night the phone rang and I said, "Hello, what do you want?" And this perfectly nice voice said, "Is this Peter?" I said, "No, this is not Peter. My name is Olga Iznichko Iavorskaya Gupta Mehemet Aliagar Manopunyuvatana. You've got the wrong number, lady. Lady, hang up and try again." She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were Peter. I'm looking for his wife, Amy." And when she said that, I knew who she was looking for, because Amy had worked in my studio a few years before. So I said, "Well, if you want to find Peter and Amy, you've got to look in the Asheville telephone directory. But when you get your friend Amy on the phone, you have to say hello from Olga Iznichko Iavorskaya Gupta Mehmet Aliagar Manop Bunyavatana." Now, most people would have just looked at the phone and hung up. But this person was so polite. She just said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I said, "It's okay. When you get your friend Amy on the phone, you have to say hello from this long name." And she said, "I don't think I can say that." I said, "Oh, and it's not such a bad name. We practice." And I made her practice this name over and over and over and over again. And she got it. She actually got it. And we hung up, and I never broke character. And I have to say, there is something about my personality that if you are gullible enough to believe whatever I've been telling you, that I will just keep after it for. And so she finally got her friend Amy on the phone that night and said, "There's this really weird man at the place where you work." And Amy just cracked up laughing and said, "That's my old boss. He's too cheap to buy an answering machine." And Cady just said, "Oh, he does he?" And she ended up calling me back, this time with a heavy, well, I said, "Hello, what do you want?" And this heavy Russian accent woman says, "I'm from Russian KGB. There have been numerous reports of glass breaking, and your number is up." And I said, "I'm not Russian, I'm Bulgarian." She said, "We do them too, and you are history." And from that moment, we began to talk a little bit, and I learned her name was Cady, and I invited her to come visit the studio at some point, but I don't think she ever would have. She was here, she was in the Air Force, she was here at UMass defending her dissertation, but she went to visit a glassblower, scientific glassblower, friend of mine, the next day, Sally, and said she'd heard, who was this weird glassblower guy? And Sally, who is a hopeless romantic, picked up the phone, dialed my number, and handed it to Cady and said, "You have to meet this guy." And so later that day, I was on the phone. This is the week between Christmas and New Year's, and I was on the phone, and this woman walked into the studio with one of those holiday sweaters that pretty much guarantee that you're always going to be single. But I looked at her, and it was love at first sight. And it took her months to come around to that point of view, but we began to talk, and at that time, she told me that she was thinking about becoming an astronaut, which to most people should have been a danger warning, that she was clearly just crazy. But I found it totally charming, and sure enough, 2 years later, Cady was selected out of 2,700 applicants. They chose 3 women to join the astronaut class of 1992. She's made 2 space shuttle flights and 1 flight for 6 months aboard a Russian rocket to the International Space Station. Our youngest son is 24 years old now. Cady is here tonight, but she's here tonight, but I just couldn't get her to wear the sweater. Thank you.